As the Secretary General of the United Nations, an organization of 147 member states who represent almost all of the human inhabitants of the planet Earth, I send greetings on behalf of the people of our planet.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you are in the future because you're listening to Cristina Gomez and Shifting the Paradigm.
Howdy, folks. This is Lou Elizondo, and you are listening to my very good friend Cristina Gomez on Shifting the Paradigm.
Welcome to Shifting the Paradigm. I'm Cristina Gomez on the Paradigm Shifts channel and on the X, the UNX network, KUNX Digital Broadcasting Talk Radio. Are you ready for this? Because we're about to embark on an hour and a half of UFO shenanigans and paranormal adventures. Right here is where we look and think outside the proverbial box. We jump down those rabbit holes where you get a red Tic Tac instead of a red pill. First off, make sure you subscribe and share these shows on social media to those who you think are having their minds and eyes open to the reality of the UFO mystery. All of these shows are great primers, and in the push for more clarity, transparency, and disclosure, the more voices demanding answers, the better. So last week, the Department of Defense fired back at critics of the AOIMSG and the continuous spin being placed on their efforts, saying that claims of dodging oversight are a misperception. In an article by the U.S. News, it says, the Pentagon is pushing back on a series of criticisms by senior U.S. officials and analysts globally about a new office it set up to study UFO sightings, saying accusations of a power grab and an attempt to run around congressional oversight amount to a misperception. In a written statement, the spokeswoman Sue Goff said, the department is committed to transparency with the Congress and the American people while balancing its obligation to protect classified information. In executing the AOI-MSG mission, the department will keep the Congress fully and currently informed in both unclassified and classified detail of its activities and findings to enable effective congressional oversight and accountability to the public. Lizzie Landau, a spokeswoman for the New York Democrat, told U.S. News, while we appreciate the DoD's attention to the issue, the AOI-MSG doesn't go nearly far enough to help us better understand the data we are gathering on UAP. So we'll have to see how this all plays out and what we end up with if and when the legislation passes fully. You know, while I'm thankful that this action is occurring and that there are elected officials getting behind the push for research and transparency, we can't slow down. We have to keep writing to our representatives and not let this get buried on the back page of the news. Okay, so I'm going to be doing things a bit different on tonight's show because my guest has a lot to say. So we'll be skipping the regular phone in to get straight into the interview segment. The theme of the show is The Smoking Gun, where my guest will get into detail on the various events and documents which were ignored by the mainstream media and have never got the limelight or had the impact on the debate about UFOs that they should have done. And so tonight, we'll be talking with Lee Speigel, who for over the last 5 decades has researched and reported on many angles of the paranormal via recordings, radio, television, print media, audio and video interviews, and lectures. From ABC, CBS, NBC, OMNI Magazine, AOL, the Huffington Post, the United Nations, and KGRA to co-producing and co-writing an important 2020 UFO documentary, The Phenomenon, directed by James Fox, he has presented the often overlapping worlds of UFOs, science, and unexplained phenomena. On his website, Lee states, We're all looking for truth in some form or fashion. How we deal with and accept new ideas will help to shape our lives in the most productive and personally meaningful ways. Welcome to Shifting the Paradigm, Lee. How are you doing this fine evening?
I'm fine. Thank you, Christina, for happening. Okay, I'm fine, Christina.
Wait,
Thank you for having me on Shifting the Paradigm. Such a cool name, too, for a show. Because basically that's what you and I are trying to do with what we do, is to shift the paradigm. I love that.
And you have many years of investigating the UFO mystery under your belt and really being on the front lines and cutting edge of developments over the years. I mean, you hit the ground running back in the early 70s doing research that culminated into a CBS audio documentary called UFOs: The Credibility Factor that was so daring and pioneering for the time. And you were the first to get military personnel and scientists to come together to disclose their personal encounters and experiences. So, can you take a little time to share with us what it was that drove you back then? Not only to take the risk of getting involved in the subject, but also to push it into new directions for public viewing.
Well, back in 1975, or even let's go to 1973, I wasn't really all that interested in UFOs at the time. I was in New York City. I came to New York City from New Hampshire in 1970, armed with nothing more than my suitcase and a guitar. I was a folk singer in the 1970s, and I thought that if I wanted a recording contract, I either had to go out to Los Angeles or to New York. And New York was closer to New Hampshire, so I headed to New York City. And so UFOs were the furthest thing from my mind. All I was doing was focusing on my music career, as such as it was. And at the time in 1973, two things happened in this country that really got my attention. And they happened within the same week in October of 1973. One incident involved two men fishing on a pier in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And then all of a sudden, there was another case that took place over Ohio in 1973 in October. And I thought, well, what the hell is going on here with this stuff? And I started to read books, as many books as I could get my hands on, just to see what's going on in this whole UFO field. I wanted to know more. And the more I read about people like military officials, people in politics, scientists, law enforcement officials, people who had experiences, wanted to report them and talk about them, but they didn't have a lot of outlets at the time. And so I hatched a scheme. I thought, boy, wouldn't it be nice to hear the voices of some of these people talking about what happened to them? And I thought, well, where can I go with this? And at the time, in mid 70s, 73, 74, so I noticed that in the mid 70s, CBS, Columbia House Records, had this thing that they had a division where they were selling to the public vinyl 33 and a third record albums in 2-minute infomercials. And I thought, well, this is an interesting way of getting information out to the people. And through some connections that I had made in New York at the time, I found myself in a pitch meeting at the CBS building, pitching a UFO documentary spoken word album. And finally, they said, okay, we think it's a good idea. We'll do a commercial. And they agreed to let me also write and produce the album, and to write and to produce this television commercial for the album. And so off I went around the country with the front money. And it was because I was doing this. This was the thing that made me decide I'm not really here in New York to improve or to pursue a music career. The record album that I came to New York to do, it must be this, because now I'm about to do a record album, but it's about UFOs. You never know what's going to happen from original ideas or plans that you made. And so I was happy to be interviewing so many interesting people, like astronauts and military people and scientists, for the album. Um, and so I contacted the Grenada mission at the United Nations in New York, introduced myself on the phone to one of the ambassadors to Grenada, and told them what my idea was, that I had just finished doing a record album for CBS about UFOs. And I've noticed that their prime minister has been on TV trying to promote his interest in UFOs. And I'd like to give your prime minister a copy of my record album as a gift, because there might be people on this album, if he likes them and if he's interested in my proposal, perhaps he might want to sponsor having me do something at the UN on your behalf. They invited me to the office. I brought my record album. I gave it to them. They thanked me. They said they would send it to Prime Minister Gary in Grenada. A couple of weeks later, they called and said, our prime minister is coming to New York very shortly. He's going to be knighted, Sir Eric Gary, in a big ceremony here at the United Nations. And he would like to meet you, and he would like to invite you to that ceremony because he would like to talk to you about your UN idea. And I said, I think I can clear my schedule for that. Yes, I'll be there. And it was the first time that I actually found myself at the United Nations. I had never even gotten past security desk before then. And now my name was on a list at the security desk. And they came down and got me, and I saw the ceremony. And after the ceremony, they brought me into a private room. They brought Sir Eric Gary into the room, and they left us alone, which I thought, oh, these people must be crazy. Why would they leave me, kind of a nobody, alone with the leader of their country? But I guess they didn't think that I was a terrorist of any degree. And he started off by saying he really enjoyed my record album, and he loved all the people who were on it. And what did I have in mind? And I gave him my proposal that I had written out, and we went over it together. And he said, I like this whole idea. Do you think you could get me people like Dr. Alan Hynek, Dr. Jacques Vallée, astronaut Gordon Cooper, nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman? I said, yeah, I can. I think I can do that. And over a handshake, Cristina, we made the deal in that little room at the United Nations. And two things then happened at that point. A short time after that, I received in the mail a little card about the size of a business card or a credit card, just, a little card. And it was my own personal Grenada United Nations delegates card. They made me a delegate. My name was on it, advisor, it was signed. And this card I was able to use throughout the rest of 1978. Anytime I wanted to go into the United Nations, I just show it to the security desk and they just let me right past. I felt the power at the time. And I used this to go to meetings, to go to the United Nations Audiovisual Library, to get documents and things. And anytime I needed to go to the UN, this card got me in. Then I found out months later that the State Department, our State Department in Washington, started keeping tabs on what I was doing. And the reason that I found out about that was a couple of months after our presentation, which took place in November of 1978. 2 months after the presentation, I got a call from attorney Peter Gersten, who was involved with an organization called CAUSE, which stood for Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. And he was using the Freedom of Information Act to get documents from our government about UFOs. Well, he called me and he said, listen, I just got some new documents here. And there's one that talks about you and what you were putting together at the United Nations. It names you in the document. Would you like me to mail the document to you? And I went, no. I don't want to take the chance that you're going to mail it and it's going to get lost. I'm getting on a subway. I'm coming up to your office in the Bronx. I want you to hand it to me. And that's what I did. And he gave me this thing, and I made about a gazillion copies of it. I mean, really, because it was from the American the American ambassador to the UN, back to the State Department, to our Secretary of State. There was correspondence between them where the State Department wanted to know what was Sir Eric Gary doing and planning for the upcoming presentation in November of 1978. And it said Gary has brought together a whole team of people on his behalf: astronaut Gordon Cooper, astronomers J. Allen Hynek, Jacques Vallée, and we understand that the person responsible for bringing these people together is producer Lee Speigel. How do you want us to handle this? Oh, they know what I'm doing, or they knew what I was doing. And that was like one of the greatest things I ever received, was knowing that the United States, and of course they were interested. I mean, how could they not have been? And a couple of times during the rest of 1978, while I was working with Allen Hynek to put our presentation together, I would be at home in my apartment in Manhattan, and I'd go and pick up the phone to make a call. And instead of hearing a dial tone, I heard some static. Then I would hear some breathing, and I thought, oh, okay, not interested. And I hung up, and I told this to some friends, and they said, oh, they're listening. They're watching what you're doing. Get out of this altogether. Forget the UN. You don't want this following you. And I thought, no, I'm sticking with it. And so I then, the next time I went to pick up the phone to make a call, I heard the static, I heard the breathing, and I said into the phone, so listen, guys, I'm about to make a call that has nothing to do with UFOs or the United Nations. And so why don't you take a break? Go get some coffee, come back later, because maybe there might be something else that you might want to listen to, but you don't have to listen to this call. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks very much. And I hung up. And I never had that problem again. Very strange. There were a whole series of things that were strange surrounding the preparing of the United Nations presentation, the doing it, the aftermath. It was just one thing after another. I mean, two months after we did our presentation in November of 1978, big news, Sir Eric Gary, leader of Grenada, was ousted from power in a big political takeover, and he was gone. It's like, whoa, okay. And then I forget how many years it was after that, but I was sitting at home one night watching the ABC Evening News, and they announced, well, today, under President Reagan, American troops went in and invaded Grenada. And I sat there going, oh my God, this must be my fault. I mean, I have to be at blame, and I'm never leaving my apartment. But I got over that pretty fast because I realized, no, it wasn't my fault, but it just seemed like, what a weird timeline of all these strange things that would happen over a year.
Lee, you've covered so much there and so much mind-blowing information. I have so many more questions, but we will be right back after this short break.
Alternative talk you can trust. The X.
Howdy, folks. This is Lou Elizondo, and you are listening to my very good friend Cristina Gomez on Shifting the Paradigm.
Hi, I'm Micah Hanks, and let me tell you something. I support Cristina Gomez as a Patreon subscriber, and here's why you should too. She brings all of her unique insights to a whole new generation, and all while she's also going through college. Listen, support Cristina, become a Patreon subscriber today. You won't regret it.
Hey there, it's Cristina. Did you know you can get access to an exclusive extra segment of additional questions and answers with all of my guests, as well as behind-the-scene videos and photos? Ever wonder how I turn my small college dorm apartment into a studio where I can shoot new videos or set up lighting and backdrops for my show, or what camera I use? Yep, that video is there too, where I explain as I go along and also give the story of how I learned to do special video effects and editing. You can get access to all of that and much more by joining my Patreon Supporters Club. You'll be helping by supporting this channel, my research, and production costs, as well as investing in new shows coming soon. Starting from as little as $5 a month, there are several tiers you can choose from that suit your budget, and each tier carries extra perks and benefits. Join my Patreon club and become a supporter today.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Gold loves chaos, uncertainty, and disarray. History shows us what gold does when people aren't sure about the government, the stock market, their jobs, or their retirement savings. Our national debt is skyrocketing. Gold and other precious metals are a defense measure against inflation and a stock market that might take years to recover. So what can you do right now to protect yourself? Call United Gold Group. We offer gold and other precious metals delivered securely within 72 hours. Are you worried about the stock market? We can also help you set up a real gold or silver IRA or a 401k. Safe and secure. United Gold Group makes gold ownership affordable. Call now and get up to $2,500 in free gold or silver with a qualified IRA. Call 800-753-8534. That's 800-753-8534 or visit UnitedGoldGroup.com.
You're listening to the UNX Network, KUNX-DB, Kansas City, Missouri.
What is that? A deer? I can't tell. Is that a bear? Wait, is that a person?
At night, your vision drastically changes. Imagine thermal imaging and the ability to see clearly up to 1,000 yards at night. That ability is a reality with AGM Global Vision, offering high-quality thermal and night vision optics. Get crisp and clear images that are Wi-Fi compatible, recordable, and storable. AGM Global Vision has an extensive range of quality-made rifle scopes, clip-on systems, spotting scopes, binoculars, goggles, lasers, and infrared illumination. Get the edge at night with crystal clear sight. Call 928-333-4300 or visit agmglobalvision.com. Use promo code TSL and get 10% off. That's agmglobalvision.com. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you are in the future because you're listening to Cristina Gomez and Shifting the Paradigm.
And we are back with Mr. Lee Speigel. Lee, you talked about being able to attend the United Nations meeting, but you also pretty much hold the unique title of being the only person to have produced a detailed and impactful UFO presentation for a United Nations meeting in 1978. Here we are 42 years later, and looking back, did you think at that time that your efforts would have much more effect on the conversation about the UFO topic in the mainstream than it did?
Well, I'll tell you, Christina, it didn't affect it didn't affect mainstream media immediately as I'd hoped it would, especially with all the information that Alan Hynek and I had put together, an informational packet that we had created over the year 1978, that we made sure that every nation there at the UN and every member of the media that came to the press conference there that day, that made sure they all had in their hands materials to underscore what we were trying to do at the UN to get a small committee created that would share research and share information among all the nations of the world. And I thought that the media would really jump on this, but they didn't initially. And there were some things in the packet that I thought were mind-blowing, a blockbuster pieces of information, a certain document that I had come upon that Dr. Hynek gave me for the presentation. And I realized at first that maybe this was just all fruitless, that maybe I was wrong. Maybe the world isn't interested in UFOs. Because one of the things about that time, Christina, was in 1978, we didn't have something yet called the internet, where people could just go sit at their computer, type in a little search thing and say, show me this or show me that. It would be another few years before the word internet would creep into our consciousness. And so the only way that people would get news about anything was either reading it in their local newspapers or seeing it in their local television news or the network news. There weren't other easy places like there are now. Now you can get news from everywhere, every minute of the day about anything. It's amazing how things have changed, and so it took a while for stuff that we had presented at the UN finally made it into the media and the consciousness. And now you can go and do certain searches online to find out more about the impact of the United Nations and what we did there, because now you can look things up. You can do a simple search like UFOs at the United Nations 1978, and it'll bring up all kinds of things to show you what we did, who was there, what we presented. And it's great because now, 42 years later, it's like, well, okay, better late than never. And so the impact, and as we all know, Christina, the public knows now that just in the last few years, UFOs have been in the news. I won't just say UFOs, but the newer term now, the UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, have been in the news a lot ever since the 2017 New York Times game-changing story that appeared in the Times, in which the Pentagon was finally admitting that, contrary to what we've been telling people for many years, we're just here to let you know that we've been studying and investigating UFOs, even though we told the public in 1969 that the Air Force was closing Project Blue Book after decades of looking into UFOs. But in fact, we've been continuing to discover things about the topic that we didn't know before, and we're still researching it. And then along with that story, Christina, the Navy was starting to release videos. And we've all seen these videos on all the news shows. We've seen them over and over and over. There's a whole new video. It's the new standard in our culture. People say, have you seen the Tic Tac UFO that the Navy pilots were chasing? I mean, the Tic Tac of all things, the breath mint. And so this has all become really game-changing in the last few years about UFOs. And now we're at the point now where the Senate and Congress are involved with getting on the case, applying the pressure to the military and to other government intelligence agencies to come clean and be more transparent to the public about UFOs. That's happening right now, and I'm very hopeful about that. But as I say that, I will also say I don't think that people should expect that there's going to be any really important disclosure about UFOs anytime soon. In fact, I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I think we have a ways to go before the kind of transparent disclosure that the public thinks it wants is going to happen. We're getting closer, making little baby steps now to get closer to it. But what do people want when they're saying to me, when is disclosure going to happen? Why don't the UFOs just show themselves over every major city, like with all those UFO movies, Independence Day, War of the Worlds, Mars Attacks. Why don't they do that? Why doesn't the United Nations make some formal announcement? Why doesn't the President of the United States make an announcement? Well, I'll tell you why any president of the United States won't do that, because no individual leader of any country can take the responsibility and be the only leader to say, well, folks, I'm here to tell you that there is something going on in the skies above our planet, not just in the skies, but in the oceans of our planet as well. And we've started to let you know that there are objects out there that we know nothing about, but we're looking into it to see if maybe Russia or China is behind this technology, because we're telling you it's not American technology. We don't have this kind of thing going on in our military arsenal. So we'll keep you posted. We'll keep you apprised of the situation. But the problem with all of that, Christina, is no, they know. We know it's not us. It's not Russia. It's not China. And I keep saying to people, who had this technology of craft that could outperform, outmaneuver any of our best military jet fighters? Who had this technology in the 1940s when the military first started looking into this? The 1940s. Nobody had this technology anywhere. And I like to remind people about that, because it's easy for the public to forget things like that. But the military never forgets, because they know they've been involved with this subject for a very long time. And it's sometimes frustrating to have to keep reminding the public this disclosure has been going on for a very long time. So I hope that people will become patient, stay patient if they can, about UFOs. And there's another thing. Where do UFOs come from? Well, we don't know, and the military is now admitting that we don't know where they come from. We only know that they're here, and we're researching them. We don't know where they come from, who they are, and what their agenda is. Why are they here? What can we do about them? So a lot of questions that come up that, frankly, people don't want to hear about, because it can lead to some fear among the population of the world. But mark my words, Christina, and anyone else listening or watching, the leaders of countries know about UFOs. How can they not? These things are operating in their skies as much as they are in our skies.
And going back to the UN meeting, you were able to be involved with some very notable figures in the ufology field, including Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Can you talk about that and how those interactions went?
They were great. I first met Dr. Hynek in 1975 when I was putting together my UFO documentary record for CBS. He was one of the first people who I interviewed for that project. Well, I met Dr. Hynek in 1975 when he was one of the first people that I interviewed for my UFO album, and we became instant friends. And I remember when I was a kid growing up in New Hampshire during the 60s, every time there were UFO sightings where there were a lot of eyewitnesses in this country to something, the Air Force would always come into different towns and they would hold a press conference, and they would bring in this scientist named Dr. J. Allen Hynek of Northwestern University. And he was always there stroking his goatee, holding the pipe in his mouth. The guy looked like a scientist because he was. And his job for the Air Force was to explain away all the UFO reports, sweep it under the rug, make it go away, and downplay all of this in the mind of the public. And that's what he did. And I never could have imagined when I was younger, watching him on TV, ever thinking that in the future he and I would become friends. It never would have occurred to me. so Dr. Hynek and I became very good friends after the album. And then when I told him that I was interested in doing something at the United Nations, he wanted to be on board. He wanted to be a speaker there because he had always wanted to go to the United Nations and talk to the countries. So did astrophysicist Jacques Vallée. He wanted to be there as well. And so I became friends with both of them, and we all worked together on this project. And it was amazing because I could read between the lines of all the things that they had talked about in the news over the years, all of the things the media had said about them to criticize their interest in UFOs. And yet, as I worked closely with them behind the scenes, I realized these individuals were really serious about the whole topic. It was not just something that was anything to do with people's imaginations. These were real objects in the skies, under the oceans, operating on our planet for years, for decades, for centuries. And so I became enamored, and I was just so grateful and honored to work with them, and just to become friends with them, knowing that I could just call them and say, "Did you hear about this case or that case, or what can you help me?" And there was one instance, Christina, when we were putting all of our information together to present to the UN. During one of my trips to Dr. Hynek's office at Northwestern University in Illinois, I said to him, Alan, we've got all these documents that we've been putting together that are really good, but I'm personally looking for something that I would consider to be a smoking gun, something that would just irrefutably indicate to anyone who looks at this to be, wow, this is reality. This means UFOs are real. And I said, you were with the Air Force for more than 20 years as their chief scientific consultant. You had a high enough clearance, security clearance. I've got to believe that you got your hands into some of those filing cabinets in the Air Force. Did you ever come upon something that we could use at the United Nations? And so he walked over to his filing cabinet, and he pulled out a manila envelope, and as he handed it to me, he said, I don't know if you will think that this is a smoking gun, but if you like what you're about to read, I will give you permission to include it in our packet. You can make some copies of it, and we'll give it out at the United Nations later this year. And I couldn't imagine what I was about to look at. And I pulled out this 14-page chapter of a book. The book was called Introductory Space Science, Volume 2, Department of Physics, United States Air Force. And I was looking at chapter 33, titled Unidentified Flying Objects. And I realized as I started to read this that what Dr. Hynek had given me, it was an extraordinary document, because this was only meant for the eyes of cadets at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. This was not information that was made available to the public. And so it was never revealed to the public. It was only meant for essentially the cadets, our future Air Force military leaders. And I'm reading through this chapter, and I can't believe what I'm reading. And I look at Dr. Hynek and I said, how did you get this? And what can we actually give this out at the United Nations? Will we be arrested, Alan, for revealing this? He said, well, if it's something you want to use. And I said, damn straight, yes. I made another gazillion copies of this and included this in the packet that we then gave to the nations of the world and the media in November of 1978. And I was so ready and looking forward to the media jumping on this document. And it didn't happen. Nobody wrote any stories about it. And like I said earlier, we didn't have an internet until a few years later. And so it eventually, the document made its way into the media and through the internet. And now, if you'd like, Christina, would you like me to read you a couple of excerpts from this particular document that I've been building up to?
Please do.
All right. Well, I'm going to read, like I say, it's a long chapter, and it kind of begins with something like, what we will do here is to present evidence that UFOs are a global phenomenon which may have persisted for many thousands of years. Well, that got my attention, as you can imagine. And it goes to say, during this discussion, please remember that the more ancient the reports, the less sophisticated the observers. Not only were the ancient observers lacking the terminology necessary to describe complex devices, such as present-day helicopters, but they were also lacking the concepts necessary to understand the true nature of such things as television, spaceships, rockets, nuclear weapons, and radiation effects. To some, the most advanced technological concept was a war chariot with knife blades attached to the wheels. So then I'm going to go on a little further into this chapter. They tell the cadets, they go back in time thousands of years and let the cadets know of different stories in which humans saw things in the skies that were so unusual that they had to write them down, but they could only write them and describe them in the terminology of things that they knew, as the Air Force told them in this chapter. So we go to thus, UFO sightings not only appear to extend back to 47,000 years through time, but are also global in nature. One has the feeling that this phenomenon deserves some sort of valid scientific investigation, even if it is a low-level effort. Now, they then go right into a thing called some theories as to the nature of the UFO phenomenon. And they list 5 different categories, beginning with mysticism, hoaxes, and rantings due to unstable personalities, secret weapons, natural phenomena, and then the final one, alien visitors. So they go through in the chapter, they get rid of all the other ones first, mysticism, hoaxes, secret weapons. And after they explain to the cadets, this is why it's not any of these, then it gets to the point of the most stimulating theory for us is that the UFOs are material objects which are either manned or remote controlled by beings who are alien to this planet. There is some evidence supporting this viewpoint. And then they go on to tell more current, recent stories that involve UFO encounters that they believe are pretty real and should be looked at. And it leaves us with this. This still leaves us with no answer to this question. Why no contact? That question is very easy to answer in several ways. Number one, we may be the object of intensive sociological and psychological study. In such studies, you usually avoid disturbing the test subject's environment. Number two, you do not contact a colony of ants, and humans may seem that way to any aliens. Variation, a zoo, is fun to visit, but you don't contact the lizards. And number three, such contact may have already taken place secretly. So it goes further along, highlighting these kinds of opinions, and it ends, I'm going to go all the way now to the end of the chapter, where it says, from available information, the UFO phenomenon appears to have been global in nature for almost 50,000 years. The majority of known witnesses have been reliable people who have seen, easily explained, natural phenomena. This leaves us with the unpleasant possibility of alien visitors to our planet, or at least of alien-controlled UFOs. what questionable data there are suggests the existence, here it comes, suggests the existence of at least 3 and maybe 4 different groups of aliens, possibly at different stages of development. This too is difficult to accept. It implies the existence of intelligent life on a majority of the planets in our solar system, or a surprisingly strong interest in Earth by members of other solar systems. And they end by saying, a solution to the UFO problem may be obtained by the long and diligent effort of a large group of well-financed and competent scientists. Unfortunately, there is no evidence suggesting that such an effort is going to be made. Wow, really? And when Project Blue Book closed in 1969, and the Air Force made public, they said, after we've spent decades looking into UFOs, and we've studied over 12,000 reports, we're left with 3 possibilities or 3 reasons why we're ending Project Blue Book. Number one, there doesn't seem to be anything that we've looked at that is of any scientific interest. Really? That's what you said in 1969? Number 2, there's nothing about all the things that we've looked at that indicates any technology above current day technology. Really? And finally, the reason we're closing Project Blue Book, there's nothing in everything that we've looked at over the last several decades that would indicate anything that could possibly be extraterrestrial. So we're closing Project Blue Book. Time to move on, people. Get on with your lives. We'll keep you posted of any other developments. That was 1969, Christina. They lied to us because now the military, now the government has come clean and said, we have been really looking into this. There are things in our skies that we don't know what they are. They're outperforming anything we have, on and on and on. They're actually saying, we lied to you. We're so sorry. And please, we're so sorry if we lied to you all those years ago, but please continue to pay attention to what we have to offer. And we want you to keep flying the friendly skies for the airline industry. Don't be afraid to go on board any aircraft to travel somewhere, even though there are these other things that are operating in the skies. We'll be taking care of you. I mean, can you imagine, Christina, when I read all of this stuff that Dr. Hynek had given me, I couldn't believe my eyes. And I want to let your listeners know and your audience know that if any of you out there are interested in this whole chapter, because it's an amazing chapter, I'm not going to make you go online and try and find it on the internet. If you send me an email, just shoot me an email at contact@leespiegel.com. It's very easy. Contact@leespiegel.com. And Spiegel is SPEIGEL. Contact@leespiegel.com. And just ask me for that Air Force chapter. And I'm going to send it to you for free with my compliments because I want everybody to see this. I wanted everybody to see this in 1978, but it didn't happen. And so now it's time to change all of that.
And the chapter 33 given to you by Dr. Hynek, just how much of a smoking gun was it at the time? Because to me, it sounds like a smoking gun for today's generation. How could something like that just slip by unnoticed by so many?
Because it was only meant for cadet eyes. If the military doesn't want a secret or information or knowledge to come out, if they don't want this kind of information to come out, they know how to hide it, and they can hide it for many years. And they can stonewall it. They can whitewash it. They can claim that whatever it was that crashed outside of Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 wasn't a flying saucer. It was just a weather balloon. So please believe that. I mean, we can keep coming up with stories to make you think that these things don't really exist. Well, the cat's out of the bag. We now know differently that if they want to keep something hidden, they can do it. And enough people will believe it. And so things are changing. It's moving along better. And It's moving along better, but slowly, which I think is the way that it should move along. Listen, I'm okay with the fact that it took years for me to be able to get this chapter out, and so I want people to see this, to read this, to know that this is what they were telling cadets behind the scenes that they weren't telling the public. They didn't want the public to be concerned or to panic possibly about this kind of information, because here we are in 2021, we still don't know the real truth about UFOs. I don't feel like I'm any closer to an answer about it, but I feel like I have some kind of a grip on the way to get to an answer, so that people won't be afraid.
But what I was trying to say is that it was distributed at the United Nations meeting. Why didn't any press cover it? I mean, it should have gotten all over the news.
Well, you're right. It was my intent for it to be all over the news, but there used to be people who would say, well, the media is involved with this cover up. It's a nationwide government cover up. The media is not supposed to report on these things. And I used to think that, but I don't anymore. It's like the media had other things to also report that day that it could have seemed much more interesting to them. Or, you know what? They might just not have even opened up the packet that we gave them and looked inside to see what we did put in that packet. Uh, who knows why? But not a single story came out that I know of in which anyone made a big deal about this. And I was trying to make a big deal, and it was frustrating for more than 40 years for me knowing that this stuff was out there, but we didn't know anything about it.
In that document, there is coverage of the question of UFOs being involved with our planet for many thousands of years, kind of like how you had mentioned. And in a focus, very ancient written work from India called the Book of Design. Can you familiarize us with that and the important relevance it plays to the entire UFO mystery?
Well, in that one, in fact, I'm actually pulling it up right now. Let's see, because I want to make sure that I'm quoting it um, correctly. Let's see. You had to bring up that one that goes back almost 40,000 years. So let me see if it's probably very early on in it. Come on, come on. We're getting it. um, okay. Here we go. The Book of Design. It's one of the oldest chronicles of India. And this is what the Air Force was telling the cadets. It said that this book is a group of storyteller legends which were finally gathered in a manuscript form when people learned how to write. And one of the stories in this told of a small group of beings who supposedly came to Earth many thousands of years ago, many thousands of years ago, in a metal craft which orbited Earth several times before landing. And as it was told in the book, these beings, and there's a quote from the book, these beings lived to themselves and were revered by the humans among them who had settled. But eventually, differences arose among them, and they divided their numbers, and several of the men and women and some children settled in another city where they were promptly installed as rulers by the awe-stricken populace. Well, you would think so. If you're part of a population that knows nothing about ships from another planet or another dimension or reality, suddenly these things would come out of the sky and they would land, and some kind of beings, maybe human beings, would come out. Some of them might have been men and women, even children. Well, yeah, you would be so awestruck. To you, and this is important, to you and to the people of that time, these were gods. These were gods and goddesses, because how could they not be? These are the people who we must bow down to. And so there are many stories like this from different points of time in history. And there were often stories like this one that told of how these beings that came down from the skies apparently had differences among themselves and had battles. And they sometimes would wage these battles in the sky where people from the ground could watch these things. Why would people write about something that would appear in these ancient chronicles? Why would they write about something having just made it up? These are the kinds of stories that you would write based on something that you saw as an eyewitness. These were early UFO eyewitnesses. You got to believe that. I believe that.
Lee will be right back after this.
You're listening to the UNX Network, KUNX-DB, Kansas City, Missouri.
Are you ready to read about true paranormal events? UNX Media publishes nonfiction books about UFOs, ghosts and haunted places, time anomalies, cryptid creatures, and more. Just like KUNX-DB Radio, it's all about unexplained phenomena. Visit www.unxmedia.com to see our list of great book titles by Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Gene Walker, Devin Listrom, Wayne Lawrence, Bill Spicer, and yours truly, Margie Kay. That's unxmedia.com.
Howdy, folks. This is Lou Elizondo, and you are listening to my very good friend Cristina Gomez on Shifting the Paradigm.
Hi, folks. These uncertain times can cause uncertain gut slowdown. Worry and fear can wreak havoc on our digestion, making it hard to feel optimum. Bloating, less energy, and occasional constipation can slow you down in your daily activity. Try Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea can help get things moving so you can get that boost of energy you need. Life Change Tea helps protect and defend your health from intruders. It's a weird time right now with all the uncertainty, so gear up and defend your health. Where do you go to purchase? Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. The specials are on the front page, and we have numerous supplements to help combat intruders. It's time to take charge of our health and to feel better in life. It's time to live. Again, getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com.
Hi. This is Race Hobbs, head of programming at the new UNX Network, and you're locked on Shifting the Paradigm with the intrepid Cristina Gomez on the X.
You ever notice your home doesn't smell as fresh as it used to? It's not you. As homes age, paint and carpet, they absorb all different kinds of odors, seemingly impossible to get rid of over time. But the Eden Pure Thunderstorm Air Purifier is guaranteed to eliminate those odors. The Thunderstorm sends out the OH3 molecules into the air. It seeks out those nasty smells, germs, and mold, and destroys them at the source. If you're like me, maybe you have a child who suffers from allergies or asthma, it can keep those so-called trigger smells away. No expensive filters to replace. Its compact size allows you to plug it into any room of the house and go. Other purifiers can cost up to $600 for one unit. You can get several Thunderstorms for a fraction of that. With the discount code MATT, you'll save an additional $10. Go to EdenPureDeals.com. Enter the discount code MATT to save $10 off their lowest sale price. Again, go to EdenPureDeals.com. That's promo code MATT. You'll get free shipping. EdenPureDeals.com. Promo code MATT.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Are you thinking about purchasing a wood-fired heating or cooking appliance but don't know where to start? The new book, Wood-Fired Heating and Cooking, will guide you through the process and make the decision much easier. Find out about wood stoves, wood-burning fireplace inserts, masonry heaters, cook stoves, brick ovens, and more. Learn about operation and maintenance, buying and storing wood, even how to make your own charcoal. A bonus section includes delicious recipes for cooking in a wood-burning oven, grill, tandoori oven, or smoker. The wise homeowner, prepper, or homesteader will have the ability to heat their home with wood when the power goes out, or to save money on increasing gas bills. Wood-fired heating and cooking is available at Amazon. Visit www.woodfiredpub.com for more information. That's woodfiredpub.com.
This is Micah Hanks of the Micah Hanks program right here on KUNX. And right now, you're having your paradigm shifted by the one and only Cristina Gomez.
And we are back. Lee, we were just talking about the book of Zion, but I want to talk about something else. And in 2015, you worked on a TV show called Hangar One, the UFO Files, along with the Huffington Post. One of the episodes focused on cops versus UFOs, which is a topic I covered in an episode of Mysteries with a History and really intrigues me. Can you share with us one or two of the most compelling cases that sticks out in your memory from the research you did for that show?
Well, I've interviewed quite a few people from police departments, sheriff's departments, highway patrolmen, and these guys, these men and women, many of whom, when they're on patrol at night, especially in rural areas of our country, they have more of a chance to see something in the sky that's unusual because they're out there at night. And there've been so many cases of law enforcement. The first one that comes to mind for me is something that took place in Lumberton, North Carolina in 1975. And one day, and I was working on my UFO documentary record album when I got a call from Dr. Hynek, who told me that he was receiving calls from a lot of law enforcement people in North Carolina about something that they were seeing in the skies over the last couple of nights in a row that they couldn't explain. And could he help them? Could he investigate this for them? And so he said, I'm calling you because I know you're working on your album. Do you have time to go to North Carolina and look into this for me? So he asked me if I could go to North Carolina and to look into this for him. And I said, well, what are they reporting to you? He said, well, here in 1975, it's something odd that we haven't heard much about. They're saying that they're seeing a V-shaped object or a boomerang-shaped object, and they've never seen anything like this before. And I said, well, let me get this straight. You're asking me to go to North Carolina to join up with law enforcement people about the fact that they're witnessing a giant flying Dorito? Is that what we're talking about here, Alan? And he said, no, listen. He said, if you don't want to go, and I said, no, don't finish that thought. You're the last person on earth I want angry at me. I'm going. Because basically all he wanted me to do was to go there and just interview all of these people who had these sightings, and then to write up a report, send it back to him, and then he would publish my report. So I went down there hoping to see, I always wanted to see like a classic flying saucer, circular with a dome on top. That was my goal. So I wasn't really expecting anything. And and so I got down to Lumberton, North Carolina. I was only there for a few hours before the sun went down, and I was at the sheriff's department, and I was interviewing some of the officers there. And the sheriff's dispatcher started getting the phone calls. The calls were coming in. The thing was back. And we got into one of their cars, and we went to an area. There was a big field, but we got there by staying in touch with other police officers, highway patrolmen, sheriff's people, who also had the car radios, so we could all stay in touch to know where everybody was going. And we all emerged onto this area where there was a big field. There were only stars, there was no moon out, and the only sound that we heard was the sound of animals in the area that were nervous about something that was going on. Everybody got out of the cars, and we just looked around, and we noticed directly in front of us, across the field, there was a line of trees, and moving very slowly above the line was like an alternating white light, then a red light, then a white light, and a red light, until it stopped, and then it started moving across the field in our direction. And it got our attention, of course. We're all just standing there, and it got closer and closer. And I remember thinking how confident and unafraid I was feeling, because I'm surrounded by police officers and sheriff's people. They're all wearing guns. And so what have I got to worry about? And then a moment later, this thing stopped and just hovered in the air above us. And then I remember thinking, how confident am I feeling now? Because it was making no sound, had no engine sound. It had a row of white lights up one side of it and red lights up the other side. And at the apex, the top, there was a bigger bright light. And because of the lights reflecting underneath it, the reflection allowed us to see that it was in fact a V-shaped object just sitting there in the sky above us. And we're all looking at each other going like, what the hell? I mean, there it is. And as we watched it, you can imagine what it must have felt like. It was a combination of, yeah, I'm fascinated and excited about this, but I'm also like, scared out of my wits a little bit, because what the hell? If whatever this thing is, if it decides that it wants to take us away and we'd never be heard from again, what are we going to do to stop that? And as we watched it, that light that I told you about at the top, a beam of light came out and just landed right on the ground, right in front of where we were all standing. And it was like, whoa, okay, that's different. And it was only on the ground. The beam was there, maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds at the most, and the beam went up and shut off. The entire object turned an amber color. It turned very slowly, about 45-degree angle, and it started moving off, as if to say, I'm done screwing around with you people. I'm going to find someone else to play around with. And into the cars we went. And keeping in touch with each other through car radios, we came across a variety of police officers and people like that who had just had their own experience with this thing. We came upon a police chief Gary Moore was his name. He was sitting in his car, and they had radioed ahead that I was coming and that I was going to ask him some questions about what he just saw. So we pulled up to the car where the police chief was sitting, and I went over and introduced myself to him. And I said, I understand you had a little excitement here. He said, yeah, I was sitting in my car eating my dinner, and the whole inside of my car was brightly lit up by something. And I said, well, what did you do? He said, I looked out the window and just looked straight up, and there was this thing parked in the sky directly above my car. That was the phrase he used. It was parked in the sky. And I said, well, all right, what did you do? He said, I got out of my car, opened up my trunk, pulled out. They had a police lantern in all of their cars. So when there are emergencies in the area that they need a lot of light for, they have these giant like flashlight things. He said, I pulled out my lantern, I aimed it up at the thing, and I blinked at it. And it blinked back at me. I said, that's interesting. Anything else happen? He said, yeah. I did it again, and I blinked twice. And it blinked twice. And then it took off. Well, obviously, he became one of the people in my report. Then we found 2 other police officers in another area who said that they were standing outside of their patrol car, and when they heard the radio reports coming in about something that was in their area, and they saw this thing coming down the road in front of them, and it was coming up pretty fast in their direction. And when it got to just about where they were in the sky, it didn't stop, but it did an immediate 90-degree angle turn and flew off in another direction. And if there was anything alive in that thing, to come that fast, to make that kind of a stop and go off in another direction, what could have survived that kind of maneuver? Those were the kinds of stories that we heard. And it's pretty amazing that eventually Dr. Hynek did publish the story. I believe it was called the Lumberton, North Carolina UFO Report. And I wasn't at all unhappy that I didn't get to see a classic flying saucer with a dome on top. Seeing the flying Dorito kind of did it for me. And I'm happy that I didn't get taken away to Alpha Centauri to never be able to tell the story. But it was an amazing thing that happened. I can tell you that. So when law enforcement people say they saw something that they couldn't explain, I would tend to believe them.
It's definitely a story that I think a lot of people don't really realize how often it happens. Going back a little earlier to 2014, you worked on an one-off TV documentary called Aliens on the Moon: The
Yeah.
Truth Exposed. And you got the chance to be in along with such notables as Edgar Mitchell, Buzz Aldrin, Don Ecker, Joshua P. Warren, and Nick Redfern. My question is, the documentary was explosive enough, and it's a fantastic topic. During the making of the show and afterwards, what was the most amazing evidence or account that you came across that really should get more public attention?
Well, I will tell you 2 things. First, I had the pleasure of interviewing former astronaut and scientist Edgar Mitchell, and he had told me that based on discussions that he'd had with people in NASA, the space program, and other people in the military over the years, that he believed that if there were aliens in our neighborhood, in our solar system or celestial neighborhood, he thinks that probably one of the best places where they could keep an eye out on things going on Earth would be on the moon. They could either be on the part of the moon that faces us, or the part of the moon that we never see, the far side of the moon. And so we talked about those kinds of things. And one of the things that we actually showed in that documentary that I was very intrigued by, because I've seen pictures like this, there are things on the moon that seem to really, really look like what we have on Earth that we know as like radio telescope dishes, like just like the kind of dishes that you can see in your backyard or on your roof that they're pulling in TV and movie streams. It's like radar dishes, but big ones on the moon. And hard for me to reconcile that many of these things were just naturally formed, because they're very, very clear in some of the pictures that have been taken by various lunar craft, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, for one, over the years that have been taking pictures of the moon. And so I'm not saying that these are alien things, but there are definitely some things up there. And I will tell you this, Christina, as we speak, there's something going on the far side of the moon that I would like to mention. This just came out recently, where the Chinese had sent up a rover. Like we have rovers that are going around the surface of Mars looking for signs of life there. Well, the Chinese, they successfully landed their own rover on the far side of the moon. And just about a week ago, a picture was revealed to the media by the media, and it's getting some chatter now on the internet. It shows in the foreground very like a vast plain where there aren't very many mountains or anything like that, but in the distance, on the horizon, there is something that looks like, for lack of a better word, a tower of some sort, almost like a two-pronged tower just sticking up from the surface of the far side of the moon. And according to the story, the technicians who are controlling the Chinese rover were planning on making the rover turn and sending it the distance to whatever this thing is to determine what it is. And I've been following this. And so far, no more word has come out, except some people are saying it's nothing but an outcropping, some kind of a weird looking rock. And that's all that anybody is officially saying. I don't know what to believe, but even looking at the picture of this thing from a distance, it's like, whoa, what is this? Just sticking up out of the ground like that on the far side of the moon where there's nothing else around it. What is it? How did it get there? Who put it there? Those are the kinds of things I'm really very interested in, because the moon is our neighbor, and it's easy for us to get there and to take pictures and to see what's going on there. So that's something I would love to see NASA get involved with what's happening with the Chinese, but considering what's going on in the news of relations between the United States and China, it doesn't seem to me that we're going to get any kind of mutual cooperation to find out what's going on about stuff like this. Scientists should stick with scientists, is what I'm thinking. And I hope that they do, because this is still a mystery that's going on right now on the moon.
Yes, I've been following that story about the cube on the backside of the moon for a while, and I hope we get to hear more about it pretty soon.
Yeah.
I was reading an article you wrote back in July of 2015 for the Huffington Post called Roswell's Unanswered UFO Questions. Now, Roswell is one of the epic cases where the more the government or military denies it and comes up with silly explanations, the more they dig a hole for themselves. In that article, you asked very pertinent questions, which still unanswered 7 years later. Out of all the evidence you've researched and accounts, what for you stands out as the smoking gun in the case of the Roswell crash?
Oh, well, for me, if you can consider this a smoking gun, it would have to be a person. Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who was first sent out from the Army Air Force base at Roswell after word came to the military that something had crashed on this ranch outside the town of Roswell, and Marcel was sent out there. I think he brought one other Air Force official with him in a truck, and they went out to the ranch, and he said what they spotted was there was so much wreckage of whatever this thing was that crashed or landed in the middle of what apparently had been a thunderstorm, a lightning thunderstorm. It left so much wreckage that filled, I think he said it was almost 2 football fields of wreckage. And so the next morning, the Roswell Daily Record newspaper printed the headline, Army Air Force captures flying disc or flying saucer at nearby ranch. And that captured the attention, that caught the attention of the press. And then the next day, it was retracted. That original headline was retracted, and it was, no, nothing to see here. Military says it was just a weather balloon. Oh, okay. A weather balloon that could leave enough wreckage to cover an area of like a couple of football fields. And so that's when this mystery really began to shape, because there were so many people who were involved. believe the local undertaker of Roswell was asked by the military if he could create a number of small casket-like boxes to be used in some military operations. And when he asked what the casket boxes were used for, they wouldn't tell him. They said it was classified. He didn't ever need to know what these boxes were going to be used for. So little things like that. But even Jesse Marcel himself said that when they were first going around the wreckage of everything that was in the field out there, he said they found pieces of things that were like some pieces that looked like shiny, the kind of tin foil that you would see in a pack of cigarettes, a very thin kind of material there that they wrapped around cigarettes. He said there was this material, and we took it, and when we like crunched it in our hands and opened up our hands, it automatically went back into its original shape, all by itself. When we took some of these things and put them on the ground, and we tried to take a sledgehammer to it, we couldn't destroy it. We couldn't burn it. It was indestructible. And then there were some very big pieces there that looked like they should be heavy, and when we picked them up, they weighed like a feather. Weather balloon? Okay. So, and the rest of the story that night was on his way back to the base at Roswell, with a lot of this material put into the back of the truck. Before he went all the way to the airbase, Marcel stopped off at his house and woke up his wife and young son, Jesse Marcel Jr., who would later, in later years, become a very distinguished member of the military and medical doctor in his own right. And I believe Jesse Jr. was about 13 or 14 at the time when his father woke him up and said, "Come down to the kitchen, I want you to see something." And Jesse Sr. had brought some of the material off the truck, laid it out on the kitchen floor, and said, "Look at what I just found on the ranch." And they were able to look at the pieces, and Jesse Jr. picked up a beam of something, and they all looked at it, and they all agreed it looked like there were symbols on this thing that looked like hieroglyphic writing, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, but nobody knew what it meant, what these things were. And so eventually they took all the pieces, put them back into the truck, and Jesse Sr. had to take them to the airbase. The story then evolved once generals were involved with what's going on with all this material. It was then decided that a press conference was going to be held, but all the material was going to be flown from Roswell to Fort Worth, Texas, the air base there, where it was going to be analyzed, and they would hold a press conference there. And we've all seen the pictures that were taken by the press at that air base, where they had laid all this material out on the floor, and Jesse Marcel and I think it was General Roger Ramey who was there, and they posed with all of this material that they said was wreckage from a weather balloon. However, in interviews done with Jesse Marcel after that, he had decided to come clean and say, what we were posing with this material was not the stuff that we brought back from the field or from the ranch. The real stuff was being loaded out on the tarmac onto one of our bombers to be flown somewhere else. and we were actually posing with stuff that, in fact, could have been from a weather balloon that they just brought up from somewhere. And we've all seen those pictures of them posing for this stuff. And then it very quietly all went away for many years, because many of the people who were involved with the Roswell event eventually passed away. And it wasn't until 1978 or 79 that nuclear physicist Stan Friedman, who became the first civilian investigator of the Roswell events, he found Jesse Marcel Sr., who was retired. And he got Marcel to open up about what he really thought this thing was and where it may have come from. not of this earth. And in the connection that Stan Friedman made, Friedman told Marcel that he knew a guy named Lee Speigel who was working for NBC Radio in New York and would probably like to talk to you for an NBC feature. And Marcel said, okay, give him my phone number. And I had the privilege of doing an interview with Jesse Marcel in the end of 1978, early 79, in which he said to me, whatever this stuff was that we found, it was definitely not from Earth. And we all knew that, and we just had to keep quiet while we were posing with the wrong stuff.
Lee, this has been amazing. Your wealth of experience and knowledge. I mean, this show has gone by so fast, and I didn't even get through half of my questions, but this is all the time we have for today's show. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with all of us today. Where can people find you on social media or follow your work?
You can find me on Facebook. You can look me up on Facebook or on Twitter. Go to my website. It's leespiegel.com. To get in touch with me, you can just shoot me an email at contact@leespiegel.com. That's how to find me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Cristina.
You're listening to the UNX Network, KUNX-DB, Kansas City, Missouri.
I am so thankful that Lee shared his experience and knowledge with us. What an awesome guest and show. So again, time flew by and we've reached the end of the show. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black is coming up next on KUNX Talk Radio, the UNX Network. So stay tuned. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode. Thank you for joining me tonight. Thanks to my Patreons. I'll see you soon. And remember, keep your eyes on the skies.